met and received memoranda from other stakeholders, including, Mr. Speaker, civil society that wrote to us. We also got a written memoranda from the Central Bank of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, the issue of our debt has been a matter of discussion for obvious reason, because it also puts a strain in our management of our revenue versus expenditure, Mr. Speaker. The reason why it is heavy on our budget, Mr. Speaker, is because it has also risen over the years. Right now, we are speaking of 67%. We are speaking of actually 67.5 to the GDP, Mr. Speaker, against a recommendation and something that is actually put in law under PFM Act of 55% plus 5%, but with a date of 2028, Mr. Speaker. So one of the issues that we raised to the Treasury was to ask, what is your timeline in terms of ensuring that our debt is manageable and has come down to the recommended percentage? Mr. Speaker, the CS Treasury was very clear that it has actually been on a declining, and we are now at 65.7, but very soon, and he actually gave by 2028, we should be looking not at 55, but at 53%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of fiscal deficit, that is the difference between government revenue and spending in any fiscal year, has been approved this year as at 4.3% of GDP, and it is estimated to be at 3.5% of GDP 2026, 2027, and eventually at 3.2% in 2027-2028. Mr. Speaker, the issue of balance of this debt in terms of internal and external borrowing was another matter that was very critical. It has been actually proven that we are actually relying more on domestic borrowing than external borrowing, Mr. Speaker. And I know the external borrowing has been termed to be higher and more expensive. That is why you'll see the rates will be different, Mr. Speaker, because during our review, we were able to realize that the average interest charged on domestic debt is actually 13.2% relative to the interest rate on external debt, which is 3.7%. That's becoming substantially more expensive. But, Mr. Speaker, the reason why external borrowing is relatively cheaper than domestic is also due to the large share of concessional loans from multilateral lenders, Mr. Speaker, such as the World Bank and our development partners. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, 54% of the total external debt portfolio is concessional, and that significantly contributes to the sustainability of the Kenya's debt. The other issues that members raised, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of the right application of debt, Mr. Speaker. What does that mean? What it means, Mr. Speaker, is that there is no single country I have had in the world that does not have debt. But the issue of where does this debt go is what Kenyans and many of our voters are actually keen about. They want to be sure, if you are borrowing to build roads, which roads are these? If you are borrowing to do dams, which dams are these? And, Mr. Speaker, that is why one of the recommendations that we have put to the Treasury is that it should, in the next very few days, Mr. Speaker, form a working committee to assess the effective utilization of these borrowed funds. And this, Mr. Speaker, will be a cross-cutting team by ministries, MDAs, departments, Mr. Speaker, and also the Comptroller of Budget, so that we are able to incorporate how well we are able to monitor these debts, Mr. Speaker. The other recommendation, Mr. Speaker, will be that Treasury will be expected to record in the debt register the details of this utilization, Mr. Speaker. And that interagency team is supposed to do exactly that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by our engagement to the Comptroller of Budget, a very brilliant lady, Mr. Speaker, we were able to find out that some of our neighboring countries are doing very well in terms of managing their debt and even making this information available, Mr. Speaker, because our Constitution under Article 35 actually ensures that you are able to get this information very easily. So it shouldn't be so hard to know how much are we owing to which country and in what terms, Mr. Speaker. And the Comptroller of Budget, Mr. Speaker, in appearing before us, was able to give us a very interesting, in fact, she had just come from Tanzania, and she told us that in the United Republic of Tanzania, it was observed that the country has implemented an advanced and fully functional automated debt management systems integrated with cash management system. Mr. Speaker, I think sometimes as a country we get jittery in terms of getting efficiency, because I think we have the brains,